This is the Love Your Wife podcast with your host, Dennis Byrne. Today is a very special episode because this is our first one ever really recording, and we're in a recording studio. And I have a very special guest, Terry Wilson.
Terry? How's it going?
So I reached out to Terry, and he was very nice to accept the offer.
Yep.
It was a nice little reel that you had about your life.
Yep.
And how you met your wife when you were in middle school and how you've still been together after all these years. So I wanted to reach out to you, and you were very nice to accept.
Yeah.
So we're going to have a nice little conversation.
All right. Sounds good. Let's do this.
So we start with the introduction. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yep. My name's Terry Wilson. We've been married for 24 years. Green Beret for 24 years. Just retired June 1st.
Wow.
So long life. So we own a medical practice and a aesthetics and hormone optimization, and then I do coaching and mentoring.
Okay.
So we have 4 kids.
Okay. So the first question I like to ask all my guests is, do you love your wife?
Yeah. So this was when I went over this question or whatever. So yeah. So the one thing I think there is some scripture that I really like is, he who loves his wife loves himself.
Okay.
Right. But I think for a long time, understanding what love meant is not very, I think we feel love is like it's something that we feel. It's something that somebody gives to us, right?
Yeah.
And it can be very transactional, right? So, whenever I say, oh, I love my wife, she does X, Y, and Z for me, that's great. But to me, that's more of a transactional love, right? The ultimate love for me is a choice, right? It's easy to love someone whenever they're at their highest point in life. Can you love that same person when they're at their lowest?
Yeah.
When life gets hard, I think that's where we kind of get this false perception of like love is something that is always going to be given to you.
Yeah.
Right. So we give love to receive love, know, and to me, I think that's the kind of false, it's not reality.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But yeah, man, my wife is great, man. She's been with me since like day one. Like I could not imagine my life with like anyone else.
Yeah.
Like I think because of everything we've been through, like I think we have a love that can't be broken because of that.
That's awesome.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the highs, the lows, it's been a lot,
Yeah.
So
yeah, I've heard this quote. Somebody said that your wife is the only person that chooses to love you.
Yeah.
Right? If you think about your family, your mom and your dad, they have to love you. You're their kid.
Yeah.
Right? Siblings, they have to love you. That's my brother. That's my sister.
Yeah.
You love your kids for that same reason.
Yep.
But your wife and you choose to love that person.
Yeah.
You could say, well, there's the mother of my kids, but you chose that to begin with. So.
Yeah, I think people like I said, I think we get this false, we think of love, which is great, when you're providing something to you, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a very slippery slope because you can very easily get yourself into a situation to where you're like, I fell out of love.
Yeah.
Because this person's not providing the same thing they did 2 or 3 years ago.
That's a great way to put it. I don't think anybody's put it that way.
Right.
The transactional love.
But that's transactional, right?
Yeah.
Because the reality of it is life is sometimes going to kick you in your teeth, man. It's not, it's not you're both perfect at the same time.
Yeah.
It's you have to choose love every day.
Yeah.
I have to choose that. So.
Yeah. A lot of times they say like 50-50, 100-100.
No.
But it's one of those things, since I've been doing this, I think it's, you're not going to be 100% all the time.
No.
Right? So my wife, yesterday, she ran a half marathon pretty much in the desert in Florida, in the sand dunes.
Yeah.
And she did that and was full of heat stroke. She was dead tired.
Yeah.
So I had to take up the load.
Yeah.
And that's understandable.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things.
Yeah.
Maybe a little praise on her part.
Oh, yeah.
For me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good for her.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
That was hard. So would you like to say how you guys met?
So we met. We were actually, we were in middle school when we met, and it was from St. Louis originally, and then there was a flood of '93 in Missouri, and we got misplaced. This was when I was a kid, and we were living in like a homeless shelters for a while. Me and my mother was, and my youngest sister, and so we got relocated from where we lived at, and then so we got relocated. We started living with my grandmother, and then I met my wife there at the bus stop.
Okay. So how old were you at that time?
We were like in middle school. How old was that? Like it was before I could even drive.
12, 13.
14 years old or so.
Oh, that's crazy.
You know what I mean? So like we've known each other for forever, know. So
was it off and on?
So through obviously through middle school, middle school and beginning of high school, yeah. I mean, same thing as like what young kids, teenagers do.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm dating this girl. I'm dating. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I would say right about freshman year, right about we started dating in middle school, and then we got serious in. I would say roughly about high school.
Okay.
And been together since then.
All right.
Yeah.
So how'd you propose?
So I proposed over, it was nothing crazy special. We were like pretty poor, but it's an understatement,
Yeah.
And so I bought her wedding ring at a pawn shop, and I can't even remember it was not much at all. It was the only thing I could really afford. And then it was over Christmas time, right before I joined the military.
Okay.
And I proposed to her then.
Was that the plan, was to go to the military the whole time?
Yeah. So, at that point, we already, Jacob was born. Courtney was already, we had already had kids. We bought our first house when we were I was 18 years old.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's awesome, but I mean, it was a shit hole.
Yeah.
It wasn't it was a total shit hole. It was the old, the drywall. It's not even drywall. It was the old plaster. It was buckling up. The floors weren't there. And I think we paid, maybe less than $20,000 for this house back then, And, but, I was working from job to job, and I was like, man, this is not the life I want to provide for my family. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And at that point, I had dropped out of high school. I had my GED, and I'm still kind of getting out of the street life, and trying to figure out what a husband and what a father look like, you know? And I'm like, man, the military was that was my kind of get out of jail card, you know what I mean? And that was my path for me to try to bring our family out of the situation we were in. You know what I mean? So that was the goal.
Is that something that you thought about doing at that time, before you were in that situation?
Man, I don't know. So my a lot of my family was in the military. A lot of people that had a lot of had influence on me had been in the military, and it was something I always kind of admired, and as a young kid, you're trying to figure out what my purpose is and what am I going to do, and it was one of the things that I kind of really looked at, but it wasn't until I was a husband and a father where it was all right, time It's not a distant I'll do this maybe sometime. All right, now it's time to have a plan. But it's time to perform because people are counting on you. You know what I mean? So,
yeah, for sure.
So that's kind of how.
So getting married, right? So did you go to the courthouse then, or
no? We actually had a full wedding.
Okay.
So it was we had a full wedding. We didn't have a whole lot of money, but my wife's parents didn't have a whole lot of money either, but they helped pay for, they pay for everything.
Oh, nice.
Everything.
That's awesome.
We did it at the local church, and then we had a reception there at the local reception there.
All right.
So it was a good time. Good time.
What is one of your favorite memories of your wedding?
Man, I think just for, I don't know, like, so this was when you got that question, that was like the first time I heard the question, you know what I mean? It's kind of, as a dude, it's something you really don't like think about, right? And you're like, man, I don't know. I don't like talking to my wife about it. But, I just remember like being proud, being happy. Like, I'm like, this is my, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, as a man, like that's you want to provide, like you want to protect, like, you know what I mean? So like for me, that was, I remember like really being really happy,
Yeah.
Like I had somebody to do life with,
Yeah.
So that was my biggest memory, I think.
That's awesome. So you went into the military, right?
Yep.
Did you get deployed before you went to Green Beret school? I'm not sure how that.
Yeah. So when I went in, I went in and I deployed I went in right before September 11th. Okay. And I actually signed in my unit September 11th of 2000, right? 1 year before September 11th happened, right?
Yeah.
And I remember when the towers hit, I was actually on an obstacle course. We were doing an event. It was like, I don't know what you're gonna call it. It's like, it was like a competition for all the MOSs, right? So we're doing this obstacle course, doing some training on it, and then we heard it on the radio. Towers hit. Went back to the unit, and then we actually deployed not too far after that, And we went to Qatar, but like I didn't see really. I was like a 10-month deployment. We're like pulling security, like, you know what I mean? And I'm like, man, this sucks, Came back, then Iraq happened, right? So then I go back again, and then I get a little taste in Iraq, and then we were actually attached to an SF team at that time. And I was like, these dudes were like running and gunning and like getting after it, you know? And I'm like, all right, like that's what I want to do, you know? And that's whenever I was like, you know what I mean, made that decision where, I wanted to go to selection, I want to go to the Q course and do that. So
did your wife, did she support you in going that route? Because she had to have known that those were the guys, that were making things happen.
Man, my wife has supported me on any and like everything endeavor like I've done. You know what I mean? And like as like team, like she's had my back. You know what I mean? And especially for something like that, like truthfully, the first 20 years of our marriage, I was deployed or TDY almost 11 years.
Wow.
Like gone away from my family. Almost 11 years out of the first 20 years.
Wow.
Right? Like that is a commitment and a sacrifice to like your family.
Yeah.
Like people don't realize, like to me, sometimes I feel like they make just as much, if not more of a sacrifice, because for me, it's something that like I enjoy doing. It was a purpose. There was a lot of hard times, but you know what I mean? It was, so yeah, she supported me the whole time. Through the Q course, through selection, through the deployments. Now there were some hard times, obviously.
Yeah.
There was some deployments where like I didn't really do any favors either. Like I volunteered for a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
So I mean, I made it probably a little rougher than what it had to be. So, but yeah, she's been there supporting me the whole time. So
yeah, the reason why I like that question for you. Because they talk about how firefighters' wives, they're a special group because we're gone for 24 hours. We could be gone for 48. There could be a hurricane and we're gone for, who knows how long, maybe 4 days.
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't, after what you said, it doesn't seem like that long right now.
Yeah.
It's not 11 years, but it takes a special person, woman, to actually be okay with that.
Oh, yeah.
And then take charge and be the head of the household.
Yeah.
So
it's good, but so it's great, but then there's a lot of other, like, in a marriage, there's a lot of other complications that come with that too, because you look at it too is like, all right, you come home, I'm the man of the household, right? Yeah. Very traditional, right? Man of the household. I leave, I'm gone for 10 months, come back and be like, hey, I'm back. I'm in charge again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's the whole, you know what I mean? There's a lot of like, figuring each other out and how do you make that transition back and forth. You know what I mean? And then, because that's a huge, you're asking your wife, you're going to leave for a year and say, hey, I want you to take care of all this shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I want you to be the disciplinary. I want you to provide, all this stuff that I'm asking you to do. I'm going to go and play Army for a year. I'll come back and then I'll take it over when I get back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's not.
So how did that go?
It's a learning process. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, anything that we do in life, especially like, as a husband, as a father, like they don't teach you none of this shit in school.
No, they don't.
Right? And then like you do this and you're like, it's trial by error, and you're like, okay, well, how does this look? How does it look for us? And it had changed over the seasons, like what worked in the beginning of our marriage and what worked that didn't at the end,
Yeah.
But that's one thing you really have to, that's why I say love is a choice. Like, right. You think like there's seasons in your life, you're gone. I mean, just think about that. You're married to somebody for 20 years.
Yeah.
Right. You come together with the same, maybe you're the same hobbies, you're doing things, you're doing on date night and everything else. And then you leave for a year and come back and you think that you two ain't going to change a little bit.
Yeah.
Come
for
on,
sure.
Man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so now you're coming home and now you're just like, who's this person?
Yeah.
I got to meet him all over again. I got to learn, like, where'd you learn that? Like, where did you, like, think that,
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because, like, obviously you have a different perspective on things now than you did 12 months ago,
Yeah.
So, like...
especially you.
yeah, me especially, but even, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, it's tough.
Yeah.
Tough.
You got to pretty much relearn each other.
Yeah, you got to relearn each other, And
so how did that work? Did you like start dating each other? Like did you have like that kind of plan?
So like obviously you have like that. I think most guys in the military SF like experience, like you experience, or even just in the military in general, like you experience that, like coming back, that honeymoon effect.
Okay,
right.
So that starts over again.
Almost starts over again.
Okay,
but depending on how long that lasts, right, is going to depend on how much baggage and issues did you leave before you deployed for 12 months.
Okay, that's a good point.
How much baggage and issue did she have to carry while you were gone? Like, what was the stress and strain around the house and, like, the kids and everything else? Because that stuff's going to come out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, how do you handle that throughout the time? The more shit you leave and, like, I'm going to come back in 12 months, I'll fix it then. The more shit you're going to have to fix when you get back. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
So, like, and communicate and talk through whatever. So yeah, I think that's different, and every deployment was a little different for us,
Yeah.
The early ones, were tough, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The early ones and the end ones were the toughest, I think. I've seen a lot of guys, which is in SF, is they would be married for 20 some plus years and get right towards the retirement and then get divorced, man.
Yeah.
And the wife's giving an ultimatum, like, get out or I'm done.
Yeah.
And it's funny. And obviously this is just small data points, right? Every one of those guys that I know that wife gave them an ultimatum and they got out, they still got divorced.
Oh, okay. That's
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, they're like, hey, get out, or, you know what I mean? I'm like, to me, I think that just shows, like, my wife has never given me an ultimatum. Now, she has a vote. Like, at the end of the day, she has a vote. If she sat down, like, hey, listen, I'm having a hard time. You know what I mean? All right, hey, what do we want to do? Let's figure this out. Maybe it's time for me to get out. But my wife would never come there and give me an ultimatum.
Yeah.
Like, get out or I'm done. Because that means you've already quit the relationship.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you're giving me an ultimatum, like,
looking for a way out.
You're already looking for a way out, you know? So,
would you talk about what that support means to you?
Yeah.
Because when you're away for that time, you're not really, are you concerned about, I mean, when people are trying to kill you, are you concerned about your home life when you're in the desert?
That's another thing there too, man, where it's like, this is a thought process that some people are not going to understand and probably may not even agree with. But like being on an ODA, and I said this in front of my wife, I said this in front of all my team, people's wife or whatever, team, when we did team parties and that, is when you're on an ODA and you're on a team, and especially when you're deployed, that team comes before everybody.
Yeah.
That's a rough thing to say. Like, say, I'm gonna deploy and I'm gonna go to combat, and they're gonna come before my wife, my kids. When I am there, that's it. It's the only thing that matters, right? And it's a harsh thing to say because people are like, your family doesn't matter. My family matters more than anything, and that's why they come first. Because if he's not putting me first and I'm not putting him first, then we are not coming home.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's the whole point of, like, you know what I mean? So, like, at the end of the day, you know, it was one of the things when I deployed, I had pictures of my family, like, in my team, like maybe in my hooch or whatever, but I never carried it with me past that, man. There's a certain level of hardness, I think, for that time frame when I was in, you know, and it was the Wild West, was I needed a certain level of, like, warrior folk mindset, you know what I mean? And then, so, but it's a hard thing to kind of.
Yeah. Oh, it worked out for you.
Yeah, it did. But, like, at the end of the day, though, there is some, now you got to turn it off and come home, which is that, you know what I mean? Now I'm like, okay, you know what I mean? It's still, they still suffered for that. You know what I mean? So it's tough.
Yeah, I can only imagine. My wife just worked 48 hours in a row, and so I worked on the bookend. So we didn't see each other for 5 days.
Yeah.
You know, it's not the same that you went through.
But like,
when she's gone, I'm like, man, I wish she was here.
Yeah.
You know,
I know, but, like, I think that's kind of the false, like, kind of, like, the false things, like, we tell ourselves. We always, like, say, oh, somebody else has got it harder. And yeah, you're right. But I can tell this story. So if I'm sitting here and talking to somebody, and I'm talking to a POW survivor, right, who's been there for 5-10 years, like, oh, I'm going to talk about my little deployments. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's always somebody that is going to experience things a little bit different, you know what I mean? And have a little bit more trials, tribulations, and that, you know? But it's still your experiences. So, like, I always try to, like, because I used to do that even to myself, you know? Yeah. It's like, who am I to talk about X, Y, and Z whenever this guy has got way more experience or whatever? Well, to a large part of the population, I have a lot more experience from. You know what I mean? And for, like, a large part of this, you know? So that's the thing, you know, that I always, like, try to say is, like, we've had our experiences, and sometimes, you know, it's still tough. Yeah. It's still tough for most people. Even the guys, you know, that go on business trips and they're gone for a week, 2 weeks, man, like, that's still. Yeah.
Or the truck drivers.
The truck driver, you know what I mean? That's still you're away, and now you have a whole different level of, like, issues you're dealing with. You know what I mean? That you still have to figure out how you work that through into your marriage. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's still.
Yeah. So do you work out with your wife?
So actually, when we initially met, I was teenager. You know, probably. You know, I think when we really started kind of getting serious, you know, 14, 15 years old, I used to pick up the Weeder books, the Joe, you know what I mean? No. The bodybuilder. Oh. Yeah. So, and I'm, like, looking out, like, you know, I'm like, oh, man, like, how do you do this exercise or whatever? And that's kind of how they started, you know, got into, like, lifting and everything else. And my wife actually used to go to the gym, like, little small gym, you know, and she used to go there with me. And we actually started getting serious and dating, like, during working out there. And then, obviously, like, fitness has been a huge thing for me. Being in the military, you have to have some, you know, level of fitness, you know. And then, but yeah, now she gets up. She started out now where she gets up and goes with me in the morning, as long as her work schedule, like, permits that. But if not, she goes on at different times. Yeah, so, yeah. But we try to do it together. Yeah, whenever feasible. So
yeah, I like bringing up that question because I think, you know, me and my wife, we enjoy working out together and running together. Yeah. So doing that, we did jujitsu together too. So doing those hard things together. Yeah. It allows you to know them in a different way. Yes. Not just as a wife. Yeah. Or a mom. You know?
So I think, like, you know, there is a reality of, like, doing hard things together. There's a bond. I mean, that's why you can't replicate combat, right? And there's a brotherhood in that, like, is different than you can get anywhere else, right? Because you're going through trials and tribulations and difficult things. The only really way that I see in the healthiest way to replicate that in the civilian side is through hardships, through physical activity.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's how I replicated. Before we deployed, like I would take my ODA out and we would do hard physical and mentally challenging training. Right.
Yeah.
Like that's how you see, people's frustration levels, like, can they handle the pressure? What kind of fitness level? You know what I mean? And you see those things and then, you know what I mean? And then you're building trust too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I can see kind of where they're at. Okay, I know this guy's solid. I know this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think you do the same thing with any relationship, with your wife, with your kids. Like, I think it's...
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
Like, you can see if there's quitting them.
Yeah, you can see, like, where they're at. Like, can you see the quitting them? You know what I mean? And, like, that's stuff you want to identify, especially in a combat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you want to stay in combat, too. Not necessarily, I don't know. Obviously, in a relationship, depending on with your wife, obviously you can probably get her to quit, but you're gonna run or something, or lifting or whatever. But
so, what was it about? I know that you were young when you guys met, but what was it about your wife that made you want to marry her?
Oh man, like from a young age, like I could tell. I've always been pretty decent at like, I think understanding people. I think But from a young age, I could see like was very family orientated. Family was a big deal for her.
Yeah.
And I could see like the loyalty like in her, and those were two things like we were kids,
Yeah.
So you're like trying to figure out what love it, all these things you're trying to figure out,
Yeah.
So, yeah, for me, I would say it was her loyalty and being family orientated. Like I seen that at a really young age with her.
So what do you think changes after you become a husband?
So I think that depends on each individual, right? I always tell, like, advice I would give, like, before getting married, right? I think there's the things that we miss, like, nowadays. Like, I don't think there's really enough courtship and, like, there's not enough outside family influence on who you choose to marry right now. So, like, people are out there just winging it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And, like, that's, like, to me, I'm just, like, looking at it and I'm like, all right, so if you're going to, arguably, I think picking a spouse is the most, like, important decision you're going to make in your life.
Yes.
You get zero education on it. Right?
And it starts off being very emotional.
It's very emotional.
Yeah.
That's it. Just emotional.
And you don't want to make emotional decisions typically,
Yes. And you're like, even my kids at times, they're like, you're young and they're like, I'm like, hey, what about this, and I'm trying to give them advice, Now my kids are awesome, man, and they like come to me and ask me like, hey, what do you think about so-and-so or this or that, But like I've really had to like instill that at a young age, and then there's been some trials and tribulations on that also. But we don't use like our elders enough to like, hey, I really like this girl. What do you think? Because I guarantee your dad would be like, red flag. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it could probably save you a lot of pain.
No, that's very true.
Right?
That's very true, yeah.
We don't do that, which to me, I think hinders, because before you get married, that's your time to like, you should be very picky. You should be like, be a little bit more logical, Obviously, you want to pick somebody that you love and they have the same kind of, but your life is going to change and it's going to go through ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
Right. And then there's no guarantee that the person you marry on day one is going to be the person you marry 20 years from now.
Yeah.
Right. So like, I think that's where people like make this mistake. We're thinking, but to me, like I said, love is a choice and you make that decision and you're like, to me, that's it, man. We're riding through this.
Yeah.
So
how do you think your relationship has changed throughout the years?
I think for us, it's just been wisdom, knowledge, and then that the family orientated. Like, we're going to get through the hard times and the good times, and then I think that's kind of where our relationship has really changed. I think at the beginning of my relationship, like, I did things that, as a man, that I thought, like, this is what a man should do and this is how a man should provide.
Yeah.
But it was very, I would say, like, one-sided, right? And I look back and I'm like, man, that probably wasn't the right way to do it, And, like, I was giving love, but I wasn't giving the love probably that was best. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For my wife and for my family. I think the wisdom, like, afterward, you feel like things that work and don't work. And then you kind of look at yourself and look inside and be like, okay, hey, I need to change this way. Like, this is probably not, you know what I mean? Not the best way, right? You want to be a rock for your family, but there's some times where you have to, as a man, I think it's the hardest thing. Yeah. When do I be a rock and when do I be fluid? Yes. When am I able to, like, okay, nope, that's fine, we can do this. Or, nope, we can't afford that. I'm a rock, we're not doing it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's the thing about, like, trying to figure that out with your wife and your kids, and so.
Yeah. It's like trying to be supportive but real.
Yeah, exactly. Right. You want to be supportive, but you're like, nope, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
So, like, so I think that's where trying to figure out that, and I think that changes throughout the years.
Yeah. So, has divorce ever been mentioned?
So, to me, like, the D word is like something I'm like, don't even want to mention, right? Because I think that if it's an option, then it's an option.
Yeah.
Right. So, to me, I don't believe in that. Right. Now, obviously, everybody's got their own circumstances, and there's always extenuating issues, and you know what I mean. But we had went through, at the beginning of our relationship, we've had some hard times, push through them, and then after our son passed away, it was pretty bad. Right.
Yeah.
We were both going through grief, and we're trying to figure out, like, how to rebuild and how to get over it. And it was tough, and I kind of, I think I fell before my wife did. She was struggling, and then I went to a pretty dark place, and my wife was going through her own thing, and then I started trying to, like, get myself out of it, and then as I'm getting myself out of it, right, there's always that level of, like, change, right, which was tough on the relationship. But yeah, it's tough, man. It's really, really tough.
Yeah.
So
I can't even imagine that.
Yeah.
So, all right, let's try to make it a little lighter, I guess. Yeah. You guys joke about it, like divorce or?
No, I don't joke. We don't joke about it or anything like that. Yeah, we don't joke about it at all.
Yeah.
I try to think, like, I look at, like, that is like not an option.
Yeah.
Because I think too many people make it an option. And then when things, like, when we talk about that transactional love, I'm not being filled.
Yeah.
I fell out of love with you, I'm going to go get a divorce.
Yeah.
Right. Like I said, there's always extraordinary circumstances, and there's things that there. But, like, for me as a man, like, and this is what, like, a lot of people don't, I think men understand that, is you're not divorcing your wife, you're divorcing your family.
Yeah.
Like, that's different, right?
Yeah, for sure.
People don't, like, I'm choosing to not just leave my wife, but I'm choosing to leave my wife and my kids. Everything that I've, been a part of for, my whole life. Like, nah, it's not,
Yeah, so I'm from a family that got divorced.
Yeah.
And it's exactly what you'd mentioned.
Yeah.
And I've seen it in other families where I think they get a divorce and they expect they're just dating other people now.
Yeah.
But it completely splits the family.
Oh, yeah.
Because the kids are going to have their own opinion and they're going to side with one or the other.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're going to divorce at least not just your spouse, but some of your kids.
Yeah.
If not all of them.
Yeah.
Depending on, what the situation is.
Yeah. So
what does being a husband mean to you?
Oh, man. So I think for me, I look at it as, right, we'll say, provide and protect. I think for me, like my job as a husband is to be able to be physically fit, right? That's important for me to provide that for my wife, right? For multiple different reasons, and for myself to be able to protect my wife. Yeah. Right. Now, this is the thing about it. Depending on where you live at, there's a lot of like conflict or whatever. Oh, I don't necessarily need to do that. Like we're not living 200 years ago when villages fought or whatever. I don't care.
Yeah.
That you need to, as a man, be able to feel like you can protect your family. Right. I think that's important. Right. So those two things, and then provide. Right. I want to make sure I can provide for her, right? I want to be make sure I can lead my family. I want to make sure I love them, show them support, be the rock whenever you need to be.
Yeah.
Like kind of what you talked about before. So I think like for me, that's kind of my biggest, like as being a husband, be a father.
So what do you think being a wife is?
So, man, everybody's going to have a different kind of thought process on it. For me personally, is I don't want to sound, I'm probably going to come off egotistical this way or whatever, but I really don't care. Me personally, I don't need a whole lot from my wife as far as like that goes. I think she provides me with a lot, right? Like for one, she provides me support, right? She, like for my wife, I like her to be like providing like, we like to say peace, like some understanding, right? Like I would say peace and understanding. Being a good mother, like that's very important. For me, being family orientated, so
okay.
But like for me as a man, like I get a lot out of providing for her. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's how I'm showing, Now she I say this when I say, oh, I don't need a whole lot from my wife. She probably gives me more than I give her. You know what I mean? Like she gives me a lot, So, and I'm grateful for everything that she does and all of her support and her sacrifice and everything that she does, But when I say that, it's like I don't want to it's transactional, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The whole I expect her to do X, Y, and Z and do this or that. You know what I mean? Like to me, I don't know that that's something.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The way I look at it. So
how do you keep your relationship fresh?
So I think communicate, right? I think there is a time to so I think consistency and a routine is great, right? And I think that everybody needs a routine and consistency within not only yourself and within your marriage and your kids or whatever, but there is still a level of if you get too much into a basic routine, unless that's something you're great with, it can get boring, right? Yeah. So a straight routine all the time isn't fresh, right?
Very true.
So you have to get uncomfortable sometimes with things that, you know what I mean? And that could be doing things that you don't normally, do. Like, kind of thinking outside the box, I mean, it doesn't have to be anything crazy, but if you normally, go to the beach, maybe you go on a hike or you do something that's a little bit different, I think that's how you kind of keep the relationship kind of growing, you know what I mean? And doing things together, I think is a big thing. It's huge.
Okay. So how do you guys get over fights?
Oh man, that's been a hard one. I think it always depends the season. It's dependent on the season of our lives. Like I'm the kind of person when I am upset, I want to like solve it now.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I don't want to put it off.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
She's not like that way.
Yeah.
Like she's like, I need a minute. And I'm like, nah, I want to do it now. Like I want to solve it. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so she is very like, there's an issue, you know, she wants to solve, she wants to wait, you know, which sometimes is obviously is a lot smarter at times because, you know, you're not in an emotional state, right? You have time to kind of go away, think logically, you know what I mean? Come back. Okay. Hey, let's fix this, you know, so, like now that we've kind of gotten older and like talking through like, hey, how are we going to fight effectively and like, how is this going to look, you know? A lot of times we will like, okay, let's put a pause on this.
Yeah.
Come back in 15 minutes. You know what I mean? When it's not as like emotionally.
Yeah.
You cannot talk to somebody logically if they're in an emotional state. You cannot talk to somebody logically if you're in an emotional state. It's going to be emotions, right? So like you have to, okay, I'm in a logical place and be honest with yourself. And she's got to be honest too. Like, okay, I'm in a logical place, you know?
Yeah.
But I think the biggest part there too is whenever you are, you know, when you're in a fight or you're in an argument, right? When the one person wants to say, hey, listen, point out the fault or something that you did on your own, it's automatic defensive.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You go to defensive mode, you know? It's like, okay, well, how do I not do that? You know?
That's hard.
It is hard. It is hard, especially whenever you see things your way and you're like, well, for me, I'm like, you know, a lot of times, obviously, you know, I use that analogy, which is not correct. You know, I'm like, well, why did you poke the bear if you're upset that the bear, you know what I mean? You know, doesn't mean that I get okay to do that, you know, get upset about it, but you're like, so that's where you have to like figure that out.
It's definitely hard to take that step back, but the 15 minutes thing, I think I could do.
Yeah.
But as long as the 15 minutes, it's not avoidance of your spouse.
Yes.
You know, because if it's 15 minutes into separate rooms, I don't know if I like that idea, but 15 minutes, we'll hang out with each other and then we'll come back to it.
Yeah.
And then after that's over, okay, maybe we can talk about it then.
I mean, so that's the one thing I think in relationships is difficult because that's the hardest thing, right? Because this is the thing. What my need is and what her need is could be totally two different things.
Yeah.
So whose need out trumps the other person's need, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right. So like, so at the end of the day, I'm like, I want to solve it now, and she's like, no, I don't want to solve it now. Okay. Well, whose need comes first? Right.
Right.
So you know, and it could be the same way. It's like, all right, hey, listen, we'll wait 15 minutes, but I want to sit next to each other, right? Mm-hmm. And then you know, and she may be like, nope, I don't want to see you for 15 minutes. Whose need comes first?
All right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's the one thing, like in America, you got to figure out, like, how does that look, you know? To me, as a man and as the leader of the household, I try to look at putting my needs secondary.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So, like, at the end of the day, I look at it and I go, all right, I try to lead from the front, but the way that looks is I'm doing things. If I'm making the decision to do it, then I am putting what they want to do first, right? So at the end of the day, it's like, all right, this is not what I want to do, but all right, take your 15 minutes, you know? Mm-hmm. And now I got to figure out how to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
that's putting your ego in check.
Oh yeah, yeah, you know?
Take a step back. All right, I understand your needs.
Yeah.
And all right, cool. I can hang back for a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's tough.
Oh, it is. It is tough, you know? And hopefully, you know, it's not that separate, like totally different. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But you're two different people trying to be one, so you're not going to be this. You know what I mean? So,
do you believe in going to bed angry?
No, of course not. I don't think you should go to bed angry. Now, is that realistic at times? No, it's not. It's not realistic at times. You know, and depending on how your spouse like kind of wants to solve problems too, mm-hmm. You know, like that makes it a lot different also, and depending on what the situation is. But I don't believe you should go to bed angry, whatever you can possibly do, you know, to avoid that, because then it just turns into the next day, right? You're both at work, right? So most people, if they're both at work, or at least one of you go to work, even if she stays home,
yeah,
right? That you just added another 12 hours. to where like you're going to get a text and it's going to be perceived wrong because you went to bed pissed off, right? Mm-hmm. So like, you know what I mean? You're just delaying that. Now you're heated, you come home, you know what I mean? And it's like in the evening time and it's like you just added another day, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the sooner that you can get over a fight, I think or an argument is always going to be the best option. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Now I will say, you sometimes still, like at the end of the day, like you may have some conflict that you can't resolve right then. And you may be like, hey, listen, let's come to like an equal playing field. We're not angry at each other right now, mm-hmm. you know, and resolve this, you know, later. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of times where we make a mistake is we don't come back to that issue or that problem.
Yeah,
you know
for sure.
I mean? So,
and then it'll get brought back up later at some point.
They'll get brought back later at some point. Like you got an equal playing field or whatever, mm-hmm. but then you never brought up whatever the problem was. You mm-hmm. know what I mean? And then, you know, month down the road, it's still an issue. You know? Another thing is there too is, you know, when I've talked to my wife is I'm like, if something bothers you, like tell me it bothers you. Like don't tell me, hey, you're good.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's another thing too, you know? You're like, oh, no, I'm good. And I'm like, all right, if you're good, you're telling me it's good. So like from now on, this is not an issue. Then it comes up 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, and it'd be like, oh, you got a problem? I'm like, wait, no, you were good. That means it's good forever. Like, you know what I mean? Or at least until it's not good anymore, you know?
For sure.
So, yeah, I would say another thing there too is if you got a problem with something, like be straightforward. Hey, I got a problem. Mm-hmm. Like, you know what I mean? Like avoiding conflict and saying, I'm all right, then that's not, you're still not going to be all right. You know?
For sure. So, no, resentment's going to build.
Yes.
For
sure.
Yeah. The other thing that you brought up was text fighting. Mm. Text fighting is not a good idea.
Oh, no.
It never works out.
No. Yeah, it comes off passive aggressive, and then, it's you want to stay away from that.
Well, there's this Key and Peele skit.
Yeah, I seen that.
You saw funny, that where they, you know, he reads it and it's like, oh, one guy's like, oh, okay, cool, and the other guy gets mad. It's yeah. It's all about how you take it, anyways.
Yeah, how your personality is. Yeah, it's a funny skit.
Are you religious?
Yes. So I have been. I think like I would say like I don't know about most Christians or whatever, but I was, you know, baptized when I was younger, and then I got rebaptized again right before, like right after I got in the military a little bit. But I was really kind of like 1 foot in and 1 foot out.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Like I would say like I was the Christian that kind of, I say I'm a Christian. I go to church every once in a while. Yeah. You know what I mean? But like, I was still like very much living a life of sin. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, when my religious and my, you know, faith really changed was, like I said, I was after my son passed away. I went to a dark place. Like I started, you know, I only took like a week off of work, really, right?
Really,
and went straight back. You know, and I was a company sergeant major at that time, and like they had us slotted to go to Afghanistan, and I'm like, and I was getting ready to leave my family again to go to Afghanistan, like you know, and I'm like, but like that was the only thing that I kind of really knew. Like I'm just trying to redirect.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because that's the thing about it is like you're in combat, you see death a lot, you know what I mean? Your friends get killed. Like you learn how to like put on this like live in this like box in this area to deal with any issues that you have, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, all right, hey, I'm just going to do exactly what I did before to try to get through this, you know?
Yeah.
And you know, then, you know, a lot of things. Finally, it came to the point, well, we pulled out of Afghanistan, so we were slotted to go back. Afghanistan canceled, right? Like, that shit show happened. And then I'm like, I went up to the group CSM, and I'm like, I'm done. Like, the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, "Oh, we got you. You're gonna be the battalion C." I'm like, "I don't give a shit. Like, you can tell me I'm gonna be the sergeant major of the Army. Like, I don't care. Like, I am done. I'm done with it, you know." And I'm like, "There's nothing here for me anymore. Like, you know what I mean? I don't like the policy. I'm done, you know."
Yeah.
So he's like, "Yep, I got you, you know." So that kind of process started. And then I kind of really sunk into an even lower place, right? Because now I'm not like in a leadership position anymore, right? And then the reality of it is you know, the Army is going to keep moving, the military is going to keep moving, right?
Yeah.
So that you got one thing where you have a high purpose, and guys are calling you and asking you to do things, you know what I mean? And you're, you know, asked for advice and all this stuff, and then that just stops, right, overnight.
Yeah.
Nobody gives a shit about you anymore, right? And then like, man, I went to a pretty dark place, man. And, you know, let myself go. You know, I got fat, depressed, and, you know, I was in like a pretty bad spot, you know. And then so like, I'm like, okay, now I need to pick myself back up again. Now, what does that look like? You know? So I went back to what I knew, and I'm like, at first, what I know fitness, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, so that's what I'm going to do first, because that's what I know, right? And started going to the gym, started eating healthy again. And then, like, that's where, you know, I started kind of working that, you know. Then I started, you know, like, making sure, working on my mental health. Like, okay, let me fix some of the things I have issues on here. And then I started reading like a lot of, you know, stuff on parenting, like stoicism, you know, started reading, you know what I mean? Just development. Like everything was just focused on like getting myself out of this, you know, this rut that I was in, you know? So I did that, you know, man, probably like a year, I guess. I'm trying to pull myself out of it, but I'm like still angry. Like I'm pissed, you know what I mean? I'm normally a decently like can get frustrated pretty easy, you know. Like I've had a problem, I think, from combat, you know, that fight or flight.
Yeah. Like
I stay more in fight mode, you know what I mean? So it's kind of, you know, I'm like, what is that Bill Burr says? Like I'm at an 8, like constantly, you know what I mean? Like, so like, you know, I'm like at this 8 all the time. So like whenever somebody just cuts me off, you know, like I'm at full blast, you know? And I'm like, man, I can't live my life like this is like miserable, you know? And I'm still not there, you know? So I still don't have this peace, you know? And then, so I told my son, I'm like, hey, listen, let's start going, because he was going to the gym with me, right? And I'm like, hey, listen, let's find a church. Let's get a church to go to, you know? And we go all over the place. And then my daughter started going with us also. She had come out of she was living on her own, had a relationship that wasn't going well. And she started going to church with us, and then we found a place together to kind of go to. And then my wife started coming to church with us, and then we got into like the small groups, you know. And that's when I was like, all right, man, like I like prayed to God. I'm like, I'm all in. Like, can you help me? Like, you know what I mean? And it's like, it's difficult to explain, and I don't even know how to like explain to somebody that it's like maybe a non-believer. But for me, like I've never felt the peace that I have felt whenever I'm like, all right, I'm all in. Like, you know, like you have to lose control to get control back. And it's the opposite of what I'm comfortable with. A lot of guys that like on the team, like you're not comfortable with that, right? You're like, you mean I got to give control away?
Yeah.
To somebody else, to something that like I don't know. You know what I mean? So yeah. So then once I went like all in, man, my life, don't tell me it's still difficult at times, you know, but you know, the family really started coming together, man. You know, my son is all in, my daughter's all in, my wife's and all, you know what I mean? It's like, it's brought our family together. That's more than we've been, I would think, ever.
Yeah.
You know, so.
That's awesome to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I just met you this morning, but I never would have guessed that you would have been at an 8 the whole time. You seem pretty chill.
What's that? Oh,
yeah, you seem like a chill guy. I wouldn't imagine you being at 8, but with the combat stuff, it obviously has been working.
Yeah.
What you've done.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, you've seemed chill and content.
Oh yeah. But that's the one thing about like pushing different, you know, I think that's one thing about being in combat. A lot of SF guys like have the ability to kind of put up a false mask sometimes, like, oh, because you know how to like take like the combat, all this stuff, and like, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but you know what I mean? Like you put up this persona of like I'm fine. You know what I mean? Some of the guys that I always thought were fine are having the hardest problems, man. You know, and you don't know that until like you're like talk to them or it's too damn late, you know? So, but yeah, I have worked on like the anger. It's something I still struggle with, you know? But I've been doing a lot better. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, I deal with some of that stuff obviously it's not, it's still my own story, right?
Yeah.
But in the fire service, we deal with that stuff too. You know, you see things that you don't want to see, and you know, I don't talk about it, but you know, I think my wife knows the real me.
Yeah,
but I do put on a face, and I think a lot of us do.
Yeah,
you know, and a question that you probably don't like to get asked, and I don't really, is what's the worst thing you've ever seen? So why would you want to know that?
Yeah,
you know, but. I'm not going to ask you that question. Yeah. That wasn't a real question.
No. There's been quite a lot, you know, so it's kind of hard to narrow it down to one. But
no, I'm not going to. We're not going to go that route.
Yeah, like so, I did a couple of things there too. That's like what people want to like always ask. They're like, "Oh, how many people have you killed?" And like, "What's the worst you ever seen?" You know what I mean? It's just like because those are like the clickbait, like kind of you know as a young kid or even as a boy, you're like that's. Oh, you know what I mean? Oh, you've killed a bunch of people. You know what I mean? And you're like, man, it's not like the movies, man. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, so, you know, some people deal with it a lot more difficult than others, you know? It just kind of depends on your personality and who you are, you know?
Yeah. But. All right. So, have you had to nurse your wife back to health?
Not really when it comes to that portion of it there. Like, I think there was a back and forth. And when you talk about, like, the physical aspect, no. Yeah. Right? When you're talking about, like, grief, like, after our son, it was a lot of, like, back and forth, you know? And, like, when you talk about grief or you're talking about trauma and you both experience it, it's not like I nursed you back together. Now you know what I mean? It's like this teetering kind of, like, she's helping me, right?
Yeah.
All right, I'm feeling better. Now I'm helping her. And it's a back and forth kind of, you know what I mean? So it's not this like linear, it's different than a physical like nursing back together, you know? Yeah. There's going to be times where she's going to be better than I am and I'm not, you know? Or I'm going to be better than her and she's not, you know? But, yeah.
Would you like to talk about how you kind of helped each other get over that?
Man, I don't know that you really, for that, man, you don't ever get over it.
Yeah.
Right? It's something like you have to deal with, right? It is, you know, so when I initially, you know, got into, after I retired and I tried to go into the coaching, right? I'm like, okay, I've been doing this for, you know, few decades, right? Mentoring, coaching, like training, like all this stuff, right? So I'm like, okay, I'm going to get into this field, help people out. I really like to help good people out, you know? And then obviously you got, you know, something that I can provide for my family on the monetary side of it. And I'm like, man, how do I tell my story without talking about my son? Like, you know what I mean? And I'm like trying to figure out like how, like, you know what I mean? And I'm like, and I'm sitting there with my wife and I'm like, I don't know how to do this, you know? So am I supposed to ignore it, you know?
Yeah.
And not say it, you know? And then like, because there's not honor in that either, you know? Yeah. And I'm like, you know, and it's tough, you know? So, so I don't know that it's really anything that you get over. It's just something that you have to live with. And it's something that you, hopefully you can help other people out with it, right? And then just honor, you know. I don't know Like, that's it. I mean, there's days that are worse than others. You start getting around birthdays and days of incident and holidays, every holiday. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can imagine. I can't actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's rough.
Yeah. I just, the only reason why I asked is because just in case, like you said, somebody else is going through something similar.
Yeah, I would say so. That was, you talk about like one of the number one reasons for like divorce. Like, like me and my wife have been through a lot of, like, statistically, we should not be married. There's no reason statistically why. If you look at the statistics, we have a 0.0001% chance of why we should be married right now.
Yeah.
Right. But like I said, it love's a choice, man. I could not imagine. Like, I could not imagine doing life with anybody different than my wife. Yeah. Like, I don't give a shit what happens. Like she is my person. Like, that. It is what it. That's what it is. It is what it is. But I would say, when you're going through grief, it's hard. When you lose a child, because I would say it's not a competition on who grieves more.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I would say, and as a man, if your wife is grieving and she is, just listen. You know what I mean? Don't, oh yeah, but I love them. Like, no, just you know what I mean? Because marriage is not a competition.
Yeah.
It's not a competition. You don't keep score. And there's times where you just have to, like, just shut up and listen, especially when it comes to, like, there's certain things. Just listen.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's harder. It's easier said than done. But I would say that's a big aspect of it, because I think that is, like, a lot of times it drives, people apart there. It's just, there's a lot of, there can be blame, why me, there can be a lot of turn away from, if you're religious before, turning away from God, or turning to, you know what I mean? And that's a big split where you can let, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Your marriage decay from there, But for me, I just, I think as a man, you have to lead and you have to stay the course, right? And then sometimes there's little small corrections that you make. Sometimes it takes a long time for your spouse or whatever, maybe, to get on board with that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But you just have to keep on with those small corrections, and then that self-correction will come, But sometimes it's not going to be overnight.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So switch gears a little bit.
Yeah.
Right? How do you deal with women flirting with you?
So for me, I don't know. Like, so my wife usually notices it more than I do. I think you get to a certain point to where, like, at a certain age, you don't really notice it maybe as much. And you're like, oh, I'm just trying to be nice. You know what I mean? But, like, on one of the questions, I don't think men and women can be just friends.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So, like, just I still try to be nice. You know what I mean? And then I don't be rude. I mean, that's just about it,
So you don't have any female friends?
No.
Yeah.
0 female friends.
I'm pretty much the same way. I got coworkers.
Yeah. I don't have any female friends, and my wife doesn't have any male friends, and I think it's destructive. It's not good.
Yeah.
Right? Now, a lot of people will not agree with that, and like, oh, I have so and so friend because and I haven't had an issue with it or whatever. The reality of it is we're all human beings, right? And you may not have an issue now. Doesn't mean you won't have an issue 6 months, a year, 5 years from now. I do not, right? I don't think that's effective in a marriage, nor do I see the purpose in it.
Yeah.
Like, for me as a man, like, why would I want a friend that's a woman? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, why would my wife want a friend that's another dude? Right. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I know what you mean.
If I can't provide what you need, then maybe I'm not the guy for you. Know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's just the way but I don't care about not being popular. I'll say what is the way I think, what it is. So
Yeah.
I think it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. No, I do agree with you. And
yeah,
it's weird because my wife is in a male dominated profession.
Yeah.
So, and there's women where I work.
Yeah.
So it is one of those things where we're not mean to the opposite sex, but at the same time, it's like, if my coworker's like, "Hey, we're gonna grab some beers. You want to go?"
Yeah.
I'd be like, "No."
Yeah.
Just not gonna do it.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Just not even gonna put myself in a situation where you might think that it's more than something that it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what do you think keeps a man from cheating?
So, I think that what keeps a man from cheating, a couple different things. Mm-hmm. One, not putting himself in a position to cheat, right?
Yeah.
So avoidance is probably the first thing, right? So that plays a huge role in it. And I look at it the same way as what I would look at it for my spouse or my wife, right? Like if my spouse cheated on me, I would take that as a person. What did I not do right? Mm-hmm. So like this is the thing. We'll say we'll get to the intimacy portion of it there too. My job also as a man is to provide, protect, and to fill my wife's needs. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
If I'm not filling my wife's needs and she's telling me about it, then am I just as culpable of a cheating issue or an affair than she is? It doesn't mean that gives her an excuse or doesn't give me an excuse to go to do that, right? But the same token it's like I am not going to try to put my, so to me personally, I don't think either one, male or female, should put their spouse in a situation to where that's an option.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it's avoidance and then making sure like fulfilling the intimacy needs that you both need.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's how you avoid cheating. Mm-hmm.
No, I think that's pretty straightforward. And there's different relationships that I've heard, like, you always hear from guys, well, not always, but some guys are like, "Oh, my wife doesn't put out," or So it's like, okay, well, I don't know the answer to that question though.
No, you can't, and and a lot of that has to do with, everybody, the libido of, you and your spouse, but like I said before, before this is like, you have to get your this is just me personally, right? So your hormones need to be where they need to be to make sure that your libido, you know what I mean, matches each other. If your hormones and your libido are not matching, then that can cause, some issues. You know what I mean? Now there's ways to fix that, whether that is going to a hormone optimization place or if it's something to where, okay, I don't believe in, I'm not going to do that, but I am going to still meet the needs of my spouse, but, I believe in the, at a certain level, hormone optimization is good, so.
So how's the intimacy changed throughout the years?
So I think a lot of that has to do with the seasons in your life, how long you've been married, some of the trials and tribulations that you have in your life. Obviously, you're married. You start having kids. Sometimes there's not enough time. You got toddlers. All these things throughout life is going to change how much time you have. So deployments. Right?
Yeah.
Right? Gone for 11 years. That's a nightmare, right? For intimacy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's a whole bunch of problems, that come with that. So, our intimacy is ebbed and flowed, but I think once you're hey, I'm all in on this relationship, right? I'm all in, and you can honestly say that, your intimacy will rise up significantly. You know what I mean? It's like putting that other person first, So I believe for us, our intimacy has gotten better over the years, not worse. It's
that's awesome.
Raised substantially, So that's You know what I mean? But like the same token is like, I think there's times, you get married and people are like, oh, I'm married now. I let myself go.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I'm not going to take care of myself as much.
Mhm.
I've already got them. Do I really need to
you hear
like,
that all the time.
do I need to be intimate? Like we're married, we have kids, or you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to do that. Both sides. I'm talking about men and women,
Oh, yeah,
right?
for
On
sure.
both sides, right? At the end of the day. But like, no, it's my job as a husband to make sure that I meet your need. You know what I mean? And I'm going to do that. I think the same way on a woman. Like, why would you not want to do the same thing? I'm not going to let myself go. You know what I mean?
And that was one of my vows was I will always keep on working on myself so you can have the best version of me.
Yeah. That's the whole thing about it, man. Is that's the thing about it is like, I really don't like the term self-development, right? Because you can make that very selfish, right? You can turn that into a me, right? I do believe in development, right? If I am, and only your heart knows, right? But if I am making myself better so I can be better for you and I can give you more, like to me, that's development.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm developing myself not for myself. I'm developing myself so I can be stronger. I can take care of you. I can take care of the kids. I can handle more stress.
Yeah.
Right? If I'm physically fit, I can handle a higher load than what I would if I wasn't, So I can perform at a higher level, right? I can handle a lot more stress that you may be giving me and the frustrations you have, right? Okay, now I can burden a lot more of that,
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's important.
Yeah. So I don't want to necessarily bring up your son again, but do you want to talk about any other the tough times that you've had as a couple?
Man, we've had let's see. And we've had some tough times, but it's one of those things like where you just it's part of life. And I mean, personally, I think that's what has like bonded us so close together.
Yeah.
Because the reality of it is, this is the thing about it is like, if my marriage and my life was so great and I had hardly any trials and tribulation and no issues at all, can I really trust that like when something bad happened, there's not a bad thing that could happen that I could not be like, I know my wife's got my back. Yeah. You talk about, you go out and do, train and do PT with your team and like all this other shit, right? To try to like, hey, is that going to be the guy that's got my back?
Yeah.
Like there's no doubt about it in my life that my wife has got my back. There's no doubt about it. You know what I mean? And she should have zero issues knowing that like I've got her back. Like I will never find that ever again in my life.
Yeah.
Ever. You know what I mean? It's like, so, I think, we're quick to like, life is going to be easy and, marriage is going to be so easy and it's going to be perfect. What do they say? I don't pray for an easy life. I pray for the strength to endure a tough one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, now don't get me wrong. Obviously everybody wants to be happy and like, that's the main goal. Like, as I say all this stuff about, I don't want to be transactional. I want to like make sure that my wife's cup's full. Like I am trying to like, you know what I mean? Talk to her. And, I probably fail a little bit more than what I should probably. And and I'm like, but we're communicating, right? Like, hey, listen, and I try to like, do those things that like she needs, but yeah. So.
Yeah. When you go through those difficult times, it just like in the military or firefighting.
Yeah.
You create that strong bond.
Oh, yeah.
You get to know that person. It's just like you can kind of equate it to working out with your partner.
Yeah.
To see how they are mentally and if they're going to quit or if they're going to keep on, going with the punches. So,
yeah.
All right. So, what's your favorite interaction that you have with your spouse?
Like talking about
like daily, I would say. Especially now, you guys have a daily when you're retired, right?
Yeah. I mean, obviously the intimacy is always good. I would say just, when we get together for the beginning of the night, And at the end of the night, I think we sit down and try to talk.
Yeah.
In the evenings, night, kind of go over everything. So I think that's probably for us is like the best time.
Okay. Any advice for newlyweds?
Oh man. So my advice would be before you get to be a newlywed would be the biggest advice. But if you're already a newlywed and you're there, and I would say is, you have to go all in. And I think like divorce is not an option. Put it as like it's a dirty word. Like I'm not saying the word,
Yeah.
So, then I would say, you choose to go to the gym, you choose to eat healthy, you choose to go to work, you choose to be married, you choose to love your wife, you choose to love your husband, right? You made a choice to marry this person, right? Now you make a choice to be with that person.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, and I would say like get away from the transactional kind of love that most people talk about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, oh, love. And I'm like, oh, she does X, Y, all this stuff for me.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. And I'm not saying that, but do you love that person for who that person is? Or do you love that person because how they make you feel?
Yeah.
Two different things,
mm-hmm.
right? I think too many people love somebody because how they make you feel.
Yeah.
Right? To me, that's not love,
mm-hmm.
right? Because I can go somewhere else and somebody can show me that and that'd be fake as shit.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
The strip club.
I go to a strip club, right? I can go anywhere and be like, somebody's going to show me that, but is that love?
No.
Is she going to be with me whenever I'm an asshole or I am like not at my best? Right? Like, no. So like that's the problem, I think, where I would say the advice for newlyweds is like, you got to love the whole person. That's why I tell my kids, do you love this person when they are at their worst?
Mm-hmm.
I want you to see their worst. Now, do you love that person?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now you're ready to get married.
It's good advice. Yeah, if you're willing to see them at their worst, then continue to choose to love that person.
Yes.
So I think the movies nowadays, Hallmark, whatever movie you want to watch, they such a disservice to us, because you watch these movies and you're like, oh, okay, well, everything's going great. He makes her feel so special. And then something stupid happens and then it creates a fake issue that wouldn't happen ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, that one thing. And then they end up getting back together, but it's still just the beginning of their relationship.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's such a huge disservice to kids.
Oh, yeah.
They're watching it and they're like, this is the way it's supposed to be. It's like, absolutely not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely
most
not.
of that's just not realistic or real or has anything to do with real life,
Mm-hmm. So do you have any trust issues or had
trust issues? So like, I will say, I don't know, maybe there's marriages that don't have trust issues or never had trust issues, but I'd be a liar saying that marriages don't have some trust issues, right? You've been married 24 years and you think you're not going to have some trust issues?
Yeah.
You're not going to have trust issues, maybe you say or don't say, right? Especially like being gone and deployed for like that amount of time, you're not going to have trust issues, right? A lot of times trust issues is with yourself, majority of the time, right? But like for me, I think for me to become one, like I have zero trust issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like now, like, I really didn't have much trust issues as throughout our marriage, really, but, I think obviously to say that you're learning each other and coming back and forth that there's not, I think that'd be a false perception.
Yeah.
So, but no, like for now, like my wife can look through all of my shit. I don't care.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Social media, phone, like I have zero concerns with any, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's awesome to hear because nowadays it's all, you see, I have a bunch of friends that they have that even private screen.
Yeah.
So if you're next to them, you can't even see their screen.
Yeah.
You have to see it dead on.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
What are you hiding?
Yeah.
What are you hiding from?
Yeah. So, yeah, I have no concerns with that shit. So
that's awesome. So, Do you think having kids, when you first started having kids, did that hinder your relationship?
So I think there's always going to be like anything you change into a relationship and make it either new or take it away, there's going to be some struggle. You know what I mean? I think it's going to change it, right? Because at the end of the day, you're adding a new person to this relationship, right? You know, a person that depends on you, you know? And then you're like figuring out, okay, well, who's doing what?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, so I think that, there was like, having kids is a very difficult thing to do. It's the most rewarding, but it's very difficult. That's the love where it's like your kids will never love you as much as you love them.
Yeah.
And they will not know that until they have their own kids.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then they'll realize, oh shit, I didn't realize how much my mother and father loved me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they're not going to see that until they have kids, you know? So, that's a very one-sided kind of love, right? So I think it does hinder it and helps it, depending on the season of your life. But man, I couldn't imagine not having kids. Like that's the one like that. I'm very proud of like our kids and what, me and my wife have, done with that. Like I could not be more proud of them. So
it's awesome. So do you think there's a stigma? I don't know how it is in the military, but do you think there's a stigma with loving your wife?
So I think there's a false perception of what loving your wife is too, right? And there's a stigma on it too. But I will say I think that stigma comes from weak men, and it also comes from like this feminine bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, so this is the problem that I see is like, the stigma is we want both sides of the same coin, right?
Yeah.
So, right, you want a man to be masculine, right?
Yeah.
So, but then you also want him to like not be masculine. You're like, so there's this false like, okay, well, what the hell do you want from, you know what I mean? And the same thing, I want it to be equal, but I want you to be masculine also. Man, it doesn't work like that. You know what I mean? So then you have these situations where people see where either a man is all up his wife's ass, an ass, you know what I mean? They're like, oh, this guy's, does whatever she says, and like that's not masculine, right?
Yeah.
Or you see the guy that's the total opposite, who, is maybe like, a total jerk, right? You know what I mean? And you're like, no, that's not true. You can be you can be masculine. You can be a man. You can love your wife, right? You can be the rock when she needs you to be, right? You can still show empathy and mercy and all these things that you should do as a man, as a good man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like, there's this false perception of this. You know what I mean?
Oh, for sure.
And like, but I think kind of what people have seen, and then that it's hard to, I mean, even for myself, like, we talked about before, like what does that look like, But it took me a lot of being comfortable with myself as a man and like, man, I ain't got to prove shit to nobody. I really don't give two shits what anybody thinks,
Yeah.
So that's where you're like, okay. But you know what I mean? Like, would I, 20 years ago, would I sit on here and act like a tough guy and be like, oh, my wife does whatever she tells you? know what I mean? Like,
maybe.
Maybe. Like, you know what I mean? Like, but I think as you get older, you get a little bit more wiser, get some more wisdom, some knowledge, and be like, man, that part of me was not the best way. Sometimes you love your wife and you have great intentions, but sometimes it's not necessarily the best way to show love.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do think there is like a false stigma. I'll listen to some of these like shows and podcasts, and I can see both sides of it. I really feel bad for my kids trying to find both sides, for the man and the woman right now, in a relationship, because everything's so transactional.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, that's not. You think you're going to be married for your lifetime if that's all you look at love as is some transactional like event,
Yeah.
Now, don't get me wrong. Like, at the end of the day, I tell my son, listen, you need to be able to provide. You need to be able to protect. You need to be able to provide these things to your wife, and I believe that you should be able to do that, right? That's how you attract the spouse that you want, but there's also a point to where, I could also attract somebody that probably is not the best for me.
Yeah.
By doing, you know what I mean? So yeah, there's a stigma, but I think that hopefully I think it's starting to change maybe a little bit. So
I hope so.
Yeah.
So one last question.
Yep.
And this wasn't on the paper, but I think you'll do fine.
Yeah.
Who do you think comes first, your wife or your kids?
Oh, this is easy. My wife comes first.
All right.
Yeah. So your wife has to come first, right? Because, and this is the reason why. So, is your wife comes first because you're setting an example for your kids, right? Now, the reason for that is because your wife is putting you first. You're putting your kids above. You're putting your wife and your kids above yourself.
Yeah.
Right. I'm putting my wife above my kids. Right. I'm putting God above all of us.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're all on that same trajectory, a lot of people may not agree with it. I may not like it. I promise you, it's going to fall in line. So, but yeah, your wife comes before your kids.
Yeah.
Because if they don't, then you're not a team. You're not one. Right. And then that's the division right there.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. It definitely leaves it open for division.
Oh, totally.
Your kid could ask you a question.
Yeah.
And then not get the answer, and then go to your wife.
Yeah. How do you
or your wife first and then you?
How do you lead your family and then be like, oh no, I'm going to put one of the kids above my wife? If me and my wife are one, right? How do I put one of my kids above my wife?
Yeah, that's a good way. That's
a
good point.
It's impossible, right? A lot of people like talk. This is the one thing about it is once I went all in, with when I went all in with God, and you start reading scripture and you start and I'm like, man, there's a lot of answers right there. We just tend to avoid, and you're like, oh, that makes sense. Start actually implementing it. Oh man, my life just got easier.
Yeah.
I started implementing that. Oh man, my life just got easier.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, huh?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
So I think that's all I have for you.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to say?
No, I don't think so, man. It was good. Good being here. So one of these initial ones here, so it was good. I'm glad we made it work. So
yeah,
good time. So
all right. So this is the end of the podcast, and I just want you to know that it is okay to love your wife.